students. Welcome, Hoshamdi and Hoshgaldinis. In today's session, we are going to pursue our discussion regarding Renaissance and the literature of Renaissance period. My today's discussion is based on the features and prominent literary figures of Elizabethan time period of Renaissance, particularly Elizabethan drama and poetry. First of all, we are going to discuss Elizabethan drama. As we all know that drama in the time of Renaissance reached to its climax, and it was flourished after miracle and morality plays. It was flourished at the hands of University Wits. University Wits were the scholars that got graduated from the universities on that time, and they were not only the graduates, they were also the scholars of classical knowledge and classical philosophy. So in their place, the soul of classical Greek literature and classical Greek philosophical models is depicted. Now, who are University Wits? University Wits was the group of 5 to 6 dramatists that got graduated in classical Greek knowledge and classical Greek philosophy. These dramatists include Marlowe, Kidd, Lilly, Peel, and Robert Greene. Marlowe is the representative of University Wits. However, Kidd's plays are also popular, but only a couple of plays got international recognition. The rest were just merely the copy of the other University Wits. The first representative poet of University Wits is Marlowe. And in the drama of Christopher Marlowe, you can find the true spirit of the Renaissance man, because his dramas carry the spirit of Renaissance. Particularly his characters possess the spirit of Renaissance man. They are highly ambitious, they are utilitarian. We can find the quest for knowledge in his plays and in his characters, and we can find the lust for power in his characters, particularly Dr. Faustus, as we all know. And there is a kind of element, we can say, that is the element of moral decay and prejudice against the non-Christian races. The famous plays of Christopher Marlowe include Dr. Faustus, Tamburlaine, and the Jew of Malta. Dr. Faustus is the part of modern academia, as well as Tamburlaine and Jew of Malta. But the speciality of Dr. Faustus is that the tragical history of Dr. Faustus, or the tragedy of Dr. Faustus, or Dr. Faustus, the prominent features of this play are that the central character, the protagonist, Dr. Faustus, represents the Renaissance man, who is not only in search of more and more knowledge, but in search of power. He wants to gain power from his knowledge. So he uses this knowledge, but excess of everything is bad is also depicted in this play, and excess of his knowledge just lead him to decay, and he just signs a contract with devil in order to get empowerment and less power. But at the end, he has to sell his soul to the devil, and he cries at the end of the drama in agony and in shame that on what he has done. So this is not only reflecting the spirit of Renaissance man, but also showing the decay of morality, that in their haste for power, in their lust for knowledge, and in their lust for exploration, or in their ambition of exploration, they have just compromised on the morality. This is also depicted in this very play, and this is also a prime feature of the Renaissance time period. Let's talk about Thomas Kyd, because after Marlowe, the most important and celebrated figure of Elizabethan drama and from the group of University Wits is Thomas Kyd. Kyd wrote a Spanish tragedy, and his very famous play is Spanish Tragedy. And the very speciality of this play is that in this very play, Thomas Kyd introduced the elements of thunder and bloodshed and violence, and he could not just treat them properly, but those very themes were taken over by Shakespeare, and he just took these themes to their excellence. So he used. My point is that Shakespeare used these elements perfectly in his plays. These elements of tragedy, bloodshed, thunder, violence, war, and all of these things. But these are comparatively the modernist features if we compare them to the medieval features of drama and Old English time period. These are some new features of drama, some new features of literature that were introduced during the times of Renaissance. This was the brief discussion on the Elizabethan drama, and particularly the drama of Renaissance that was brought by or that was flourished by the University Wits. Now let's talk about the poetry of Elizabethan time period. The representative Elizabethan poets are Sidney, Spenser, Shakespeare, and there are also a couple of more like Thomas Wyatt and Errol of Surrey. But the most representative and the celebrated one are Sidney, Spenser, and Shakespeare. Philip Sidney was not only a poet, he was also a critic. He was also a prose writer on that time, and he also belonged to court. He had some celebrated position in the court, and Sidney is inspired of the Greek and classical models, because his collection of poetry is Trophel and Stella, that is based on the sonnets. These sonnets celebrate the history of love, and particularly erotic and romantic love, or you can say the platonic sort of love as well. And this very feature shows that he actually got inspiration from classical Greek philosophy as well as Greek mythology. When we talk about Shakespeare as a poet, then we find almost 126 sonnets that were written by William Shakespeare, and all those sonnets are based on a very docile and very lucid sort of imagery, and very fertile themes of love and emotions and imagination. There are two leading figures of those sonnets, the fair lad and the dark lady. But both of these characters, they are known as fair lad and dark lady, not because of their physical features, but also because of the unidentified representation of these characters, because these characters were addressed in those sonnets, but they are not highlighted, their names are not highlighted. So that's why these sonnets, most of those sonnets, they revolve around the love and relationship between the fair lad and the dark lady. Some of the critics also argue that this very love of dark lady is actually showing the unfulfilled ambition of Shakespeare's own love, and because he had not a celebrated, or he had not a very satisfied love life and the relationship life. So that quest for relationship and that unfulfilled desire of love is also depicted in these sonnets for that dark lady. And the fair lad, according to the critics and according to some historical accounts, the fair lad of Shakespeare's sonnet is actually the patron of Shakespeare. He was also a friend of Shakespeare, and he Shakespeare got patronage from that person. So the fair lad is also can also be that very person. Technically speaking, Shakespeare and Marlowe use the technique of blank verses in their works, and Shakespeare just and Marlowe brought this very technique to its perfection. Now is the turn of Spenser. Spenserian poetry is very popular because it has both features, like the features of medieval era as well as of the modern era, means the Renaissance time period. So, the in Spenserian poetry there are two elements that are depicted. Some are from medieval era and some are from Shakespearean time period. I mean, some from Renaissance. He's also a representative poet of his time period, and on one hand, you can find chivalry in his poems, his inspiration from Catholicism and the Reformed form of Protestantism, and you can also find the spirit of humanism in his poems. His very celebrated work is The Fairy Queen. That is actually an epic, and Fairy Queen is basically the celebration of Queen Elizabeth, and the challenges she was facing on that time. It is an allegorical representation of those challenges the queen had to face on that time, and the central character of this poem, the Gloriana, Queen Gloriana, is actually the representation of Queen Elizabeth. Another important work of Spenser is Shepard's Calendar, and these poems having the pastoral settings again. You can find a medieval aspect and a medieval perspective in these poems. It's the feature of medieval time period. Then we can find Amorati, a collection of sonnets, a Bethlehemian, a marriage song, a marriage hymn. So these are the celebrated works of Spenser. There is another primary feature of Spenserian poetry and the Spenserian time period, because the very age of Spenser is also known as the age of nationalism, because on that time the nationalistic zeal was very much among the literary figures of the time. Like in Spenser's Fairy Queen, there is the celebration of Queen. A few other people, they were also writing in support of their queen and in support of their land. So this was the age of an extreme nationalistic passion. Some people were writing the prose, although the prose was very artificial on that time, but it dictates the rules of good citizenship in England. Sidney's Arcadia can also fall into the category of such works. The important prose writers on that time were Lilly, Sidney, Thomas Malory, and Hakluyt, and they used to write romances and some kind of travelogues, and as well as the description of good citizenship, and this sort of prose was written by these people. But Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur is actually the very celebrated literary piece of that time, and it was a romance. And this was all about Renaissance poetry and Elizabethan drama as well as prose. We will have a separate discussion on Shakespearean drama. Thank you so much.